Hey everybody, welcome to another ATDev Podcast. I'm so happy to be joined today by a longtime friend, Brittany Martin Dejean, a collaborator in the disability and inclusion space. Hey Brittany, how you doing?
Hi, Owen. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And I'm so excited for our listeners to learn more about you and the amazing work that you've done. So
Uh,
you have really had quite an interesting journey through entrepreneurship and with the through line of disability. Can you talk a little bit about your background and how did you get your start?
yes, I'd be happy to. Disability as a subject in my life comes from a personal foundation. My dad was in a car accident when I was 12 years old and had a spinal cord injury. And so since I was 12, my dad's been a full time wheelchair user. That by the time I got to college, it was a topic that I was exploring more, kind of out of the curiosity of my family's experiences. And the first foray for me was recognizing how much support my family had after my dad's injury and wanting to replicate that for other families. Once I got
Mm,
older and realized that not everyone had the support that we did, that enabled my
yeah,
dad to reestablish his life and live well with quadriplegia. And that's how you and I met originally. So we met for the years that I was exploring that pursuit. The organization was called Able Thrive, and I was really passionate about helping families like mine understand that even in the wake of a devastating injury and changed mobility, that there was life to be lived, and lots of people around the world who were demonstrating how that could be done. And from there, I was very much focused on that solution, but organically I just found that there was a lot of misconceptions about disability that came along with the work I did, including families who were facing new injuries being really caught up in a lot of misconceptions that led people to have lack of hope or lack of awareness of what would be possible. And so
sure.
that kind of and when I would talk about my work, there would be people who would tell me things that non-disabled people telling me things about their questions and awkwardness around disability, wanting guidance. And so as Able Thrive evolved, I ended up in more and more conversations, almost coaching non-disabled people in their own perspectives about disability to try to change the narrative. An example being like one person once told me like I had a boss in a wheelchair once and I didn't know what to do, so I avoided him. So it's very like honest
Oh, jeez.
that I felt grateful they told me, but also recognized that I wasn't really capable of letting them walk away without really like talking them through that interaction and trying to help them. And in hindsight now, I had my own moments of awkwardness. Like I was very comfortable around my dad and other people in wheelchairs, but in college I met another person with a different disability and I felt that awkwardness and discomfort and that fear. And granted for me, I recognized that I was treating this person the way that people treated my dad. So it was easier for me to understand I needed to fix it. And I was surrounded by empathetic people who helped me do that. So I had that all in place before I entered the corporate world. But once I not Airbnb, Able Thrive, once I left that organization, it's now part of United Spinal. I was working at Airbnb in their diversity and inclusion and disability efforts. But in that professional scope, again, I began to see how much disability discomfort was really something that needed to be addressed and that it was a barrier to inclusion that we're not talking about enough. So, anyway, number of years at Airbnb, was able to do trainings on this and things that were really fulfilling for me, and also did other projects and things. And then I left Airbnb in March and started a new company called Inclusion Jumpstart, where after all these years, we're pushing nearly 20 that I've worked in this one way or another. But I just decided that it was time for me to really niche down to what I feel my best way to have an impact is, which was addressing that discomfort, calling it out for what it is with empathy, with respect, but getting it out of the shadows, being open about my
Right.
experiences, and trying to help more people transform their perspectives on disability so that we can accelerate disability inclusion in business and societies and organizations rather than what I feel has been like an unnecessarily slow pace of evolution, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's
Yeah,
me.
that's great. And I mean, that's such such an interesting perspective. And I think, yeah, it's really, really cool how you've taken your, personal lived experience and turned that into a career that's really fulfilling and also meaningful. I think that's something that you see, not infrequently in the, world of assistive technology and disability is there's really a lot of lived experience, and I can also relate to what you're saying about the, discomfort around disability. As a wheelchair user, I'm definitely have been on the receiving end of that discomfort and people not knowing how to act, but also I often sometimes feel uncomfortable around disabilities that I'm not familiar with or have
Oh,
experience with. So even as someone with a disability, I think I can learn a lot from you.
I'm still here. Did I cut off?
Yeah, yeah, a little bit, but no worries. We can edit it later.
All
Maybe
right,
we
I'm
can
still
turn
here.
off video. Maybe that'll help a little bit. Are you still there?
Yes, I am. Sorry about that.
Okay, no worries. So yeah, I was just saying, even as a person with a disability, I still often notice myself feeling, discomfort around other disabilities that I may not have as much experience with. And so I feel like I can learn from you in that respect as well.
That's interesting for you to share that. Yeah, it's how when I felt that I was being awkward, it was an awareness like, I am treating her the way people have treated my dad during my childhood. I can't, this, something's off. Like, I can't continue to do this. That's not, it was just a wake up call for me. And that was very, like I said, lucky
I think we might have lost
that
you
I was
again.
surrounded by people with whom I could be honest, who helped me piece together my perspective, like fill in the gaps that I had that was keeping me from having the same kind of regard I had for my dad and other wheelchair users as I did with other disabilities.
Right. Yeah, that's so interesting. And so, you've used a lot of, technology help to help advance your mission and, definitely Airbnb is a well-known tech company. I'm curious if you could just talk a little bit more about how technology has fit into the work you do and, what things have been made possible. And, one thing I'm thinking of in particular that really stood out to me with your work at Able Thrive was the interactive like resource selector that you made that
Right.
you could help
Good memory.
find.
A while ago.
It really stood out. Where you could help, hone in on the right type of resources.
Yeah, honestly, technology was the root of even ever believing I could do something. When I was in college and I realized how much support my dad had and my family had in the wake of the accident, like I it was the late 90s. There wasn't technology. And so by the time I got to college, the impetus was that I had met someone with a spinal cord injury also on my semester abroad in China who had more
Mm,
physical mobility than my dad, but told me he would spend the rest of his life in bed. And it just didn't compute for me because I was like, I was like, there's no reason you can't be even more independent than my own dad. And that was when it hit me that I was like, we didn't have to worry about technology in the late 90s because my dad was at that great hospital. Mentors physically were present at the facility. My dad's insurance covered 5 months of inpatient rehab. So it was very in
right.
person. But by the time I was in college, I realized if we used technology, you wouldn't have to rely on being in the same place. Because what I realized is like my family was lucky to be an hour from Philadelphia, making that commute and reality of my dad being there much more feasible. But there's a lot of people who are either diagnosed with or have children born with or have their own accidents or diagnoses that don't live near top medical facilities. And so once that realization really sunk in, it made me realize how fragile my family's survival had been. Like, had we just Had we lived elsewhere, would we have ended up would we have been able to evolve the way we did? So
Right.
technology was really like the first time I was thinking about this, it was like 2006. So again, like technology was way different then than it is now, but it was still this idea of being a vehicle. And so what you were saying about Able Thrive, yeah, we not only wanted to bring the resources together in an online and accessible place, but we did also tag and filter and curate things in a way that allowed people to find if someone, we categorized everything by mobility for legs, trunk, hand, fingers, and arms. So that if we found a video, for example, a YouTube video of someone getting dressed, we would tag it with that person's mobility so that a user would only be getting content curated to them that would be applicable to their mobility profile. And that the idea
Right.
for us in that was like expedite this process for people, leverage technology so that the burden is not on the people doing all the searching, doing all the triaging, and sometimes honestly getting disappointed, seeing something, thinking it might work for them, and then realizing that person might have a different degree of mobility. Then
Yeah.
in Airbnb as a technology platform, I think what I really saw was just how cool it is to have an impact on something that then instantly goes out to the world just because of the scale of the company. Fun. And again, like finding ways to share information, filter information that would help people find properties that could meet their accessibility needs. Now, for me, I'm not working with any kind of tech platform at the moment. I'm just, my goal is to start the conversation about disability discomfort wherever I can as a speaker or workshop facilitator. But technology is still, it, COVID helped normalize this also, but just the fact that I can show up somewhere and have this conversation, or I can jump on Zoom and have this conversation. I can come on your podcast and have this conversation. So again, like technology for me has been such an enabler to reach people who could be anywhere in the world, who share passions or share challenges, and bridge those gaps.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as a person with a disability, I really, have been enabled by technology, and
Mhm.
that's why I'm able to run a company and live on my own, and be independent. And so, there's a huge component of technology, but equally, if not more, and in fact, definitely more, is the human component, and you know all of the technology wouldn't mean, anything without the people that enable it and support people with disabilities. And so I think that's something really, really cool about what you're doing now is that you're, you've addressed a lot of the, technological supports for people with disabilities. And now you've moved on to how can you support the emotional and mental and, people that are, in proximity to disability. How can we educate them and by educating them, make a more inclusive experience for people with disabilities?
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. And so, what are some common misconceptions that you often encounter about disability or accessibility?
Ooh, there are misconceptions for both of them. I'll start with the first one that hit me when you threw accessibility into it, which is that disability and accessibility are the same thing or interchangeable.
Mm, interesting.
I came upon that a lot navigating corporate spaces and having to remind people it's not just the term, but also the way that the work shows up in a professional environment. Because I see disability and accessibility as like a Venn diagram. Like you can be doing an disability inclusion initiative and it has nothing to do with accessibility and vice versa.
Right.
And so
Interesting.
that is usually an accessibility initiative will always benefit like disabled people, but their disability inclusion does not have to entail that. And obviously there's overlap and interplay and all that stuff, but I got to be quite frustrated at a lot of times having to have this conversation with people because I was like, wait, people can
Sure.
caption them on a video and think they're done. It's a yes and. Like caption your videos, caption your all hands at your team meetings, and there is more you need to think about when it comes to disability inclusion. I think that's one that people is helpful for people to distinguish. When it comes to disability, so for the years that I just had random conversations with people where they would share these, admit these feelings and this awkwardness that, again, like they were clearly uncomfortable feeling. I had these one off conversations, and then over the years, came to find that there were certain themes that I felt underlined most of those comments. So whether it was the wheelchair, the boss in a wheelchair comment, or other kinds of assumptions they made or said, I tend to bottom out at three misconceptions that I think underlie a lot of the problems. So the first being that people with disabilities are miserable. Second,
Yeah.
people with disabilities are incapable. And the third
Mm,
being that people with disabilities are inspirations. And I asterisk
mm,
that with just when that term is used in ways that are patronizing and undermining of actual disabled people's accomplishments.
yeah.
Um,
Wow. Those all three of those hit home for me.
Okay, good. But I found that a lot of people couldn't necessarily or wouldn't necessarily articulate those three specific misconceptions, but they would act or say things. And I came to understand that they had to believe those things, or one or all of them, to be saying the things they were saying to me. And so when I came up, when I was before Airbnb, what I had done was I had created a workshop about this to transform perspectives on people with disabilities. And
Okay.
it's a three-step process, and it is one, two, three. We transform, we reframe those misconceptions, because if you don't have an open, upfront conversation, in my opinion, if you don't have this open, upfront conversation with people carrying these misconceptions, they will go unchecked. Many
Yeah.
people believe them to be true, right? So they're not even aware sometimes that they are misconceptions. Like they may see someone with a disability do something that breaks the rules, quote unquote, that they have in their head, but they would be seen as the exception and not the norm. And so, what I have learned is that the root of a lot of it for me is having that frank conversation to explain to people, to challenge this assumption they make about misery and capability and inspiration, to say to, and like over the years I figured out how to do it, right? Like to get people to change their minds. And the benefit of it is that it is not etiquette, and it is not something to memorize. It's a shift. And once you shift, people don't shift back, right? Because they understand the flaws in their reasoning, and they're no longer thinking about getting an A on an etiquette test. They're understanding what they were missing about the interactions, and understand what was feeding their, I call it FOMO, their fear of messing up, that was keeping them
I
in cycles of
love that.
avoidance. So that's those are the three misconceptions of disability. I think otherwise the misconceptions of accessibility on its own are that it's only for disabled people, which just undersells its value, and
Yeah.
that there's a single definition for it that makes something accessible or not. And I think that's another
Right.
really big misconception.
Man, there's so much to unpack there. And
I just threw it all at
yeah.
you. We get to choose where we go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I mean, yeah, I wish we had way more time to go into all of that, but yeah, that's what your workshops are for too. So,
Or I talk about on LinkedIn. I'm a broken record at this point, trying to bring these points home for people.
well, it's really important, as a person with a disability, there are so many times where I can feel that people are uncomfortable and they're uncomfortable to even say that they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And, that really is, it can be hurtful, to the person with a disability and, it can make it really awkward. And so, being open and honest is something that's just, so important. I would way rather, for me personally, have someone come up and say, "Hey, I'm not sure how to act right now. Do you have any pointers?" or something like that, rather than trying to, you know, play it cool. And that's really, yeah, something I think a lot of people can learn from. So we're almost out of time, but there's one more question I wanted to ask.
Sure.
If you could wave a magic wand,
Hmm.
what would be one thing that you would change about how society views disability?
If I had the magic wand, I would make those three shifts, right? Like to me, it's the root of all of it is those misconceptions. And so if we could get everybody seeing disability differently, I think the rest would flow. Like people would see accessibility differently. I think a lot of the misconceptions about accessibility stem from misconceptions about disability. So for me, when I think about what you're saying about what you have endured with other people's awkwardness and so many other friends of mine who are more surprised when someone's comfortable than when they're or that because you're so used to
Right?
being awkward, right? I think that we have systemic issues, right, throughout institutions, schools, healthcare, like you name it. But I think that what I've come to feel in my experience is that if we don't address the human issue, I think it will be wildly difficult to just jump to the systemic impact because a lot of awkward and uninformed people built the systems we live in now. And
That's for sure.
if we shame people to the hills, like it's just going to reinforce the cycles of avoidance. And unfortunately, a lot of people can and do hide behind those cycles of avoidance. I'm not saying any of this is okay. I'm just saying the way it is.
Right.
And I would love to see that if I could wave a magic wand and just update the disability narrative, that it's just that along the lines of those three misconceptions I told you, that we move disability to being this neutral facet of people's identity that then is defined by that person, right? Because
Mm,
no person with the same diagnosis is going to be the same, and no one even sees there's just so much nuance and diversity within the disability community that has gotten washed away in this bigger perspective of disability being a monolith, right? Or that there's one way to do it, that there's this manual that people were supposed to have read. And then if they just memorized it, they could check all the boxes. Like we got to move away from grades and check boxes. And I think recenter people on understanding that really it's about normalizing human interaction and normalizing that the humanity of people with disabilities so that it becomes not an exercise in treating people differently and treating people the right way differently. It's about extending people's cultural social norms to a group of people that many assumed they couldn't use those social norms with. And then getting to know people on an individual level, whether that's their individual preferences, their individual accessibility needs, starting from a place of curiosity rather than assumption. And of course, grounded in empathy and humanity.
oh, I love that. So much truth in there.
Thanks, Owen.
Wonderful, Brittany. Well, thank you so much for your time. This has been so enlightening, and I feel like I've learned a lot, and our listeners, I'm sure, feel the same. And for people who want to reach out, learn more about your work, or connect, what's a good way to find you online?
Definitely LinkedIn is a great way. Brittany Martin Dejean on LinkedIn, and feel free to message me there if I can help people figure out if is this you, right? Do you have FOMO? Do you want to be better at this? Let's talk. Or of course, if there's someone in a company that wants to bring this conversation to their teams, to their culture. Otherwise, inclusionjumpstart.com is the website, but whatever way people want to reach me, again, like for me, my mission goal at this point is just to bring this conversation to more places and lay a foundation for people's learning journeys so that they can continue forward and be more open to learning people with lived experiences from their own mouths and the things that they need and furthering representation.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Brittany, and thank you to all our listeners. And stay tuned to the next one. Don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, take care, everybody.
Thanks, Owen.